It's that initial first step. That's the scariest part. It's actually grabbing the tool. It's actually signing up for the class. It's actually stepping out in front of a crowd and just start talking. That's the most terrifying part of the entire thing. Whatever that is, like if you could figure out like what scares you, if you just make one little tiny step, it'll go so far. It'll empower you and it'll embolden where you want to go. It'll turn you into who you want to be. These are all things that shape you as a person.
Welcome to the Path Podcast. I'm Mike Salemi. I believe that uncharted trails make the best life stories. So take a deep breath, put one foot in front of the other, and trust the ground under your feet. Join me in discussions on health, performance, business, leadership, and spiritual self-mastery because these topics are windows into how well each of us have learned to trust our own path. Let's go. This is a Soulfire production. Today on the show, we've got Justin Andrews. Now, Justin is one of the hosts of the Mind Pump podcast, and already on the path, we've had Adam Schaefer and Sal DiStefano on, which were fantastic episodes. And Justin brings in a very unique perspective, especially in the realm of health, fitness, and performance, because Justin was not only a collegiate football player, he's got a degree in kinesiology, but he's really at Mind Pump, the resident expert on all things unconventional training, which is really a big part of why we resonate so much with each other. And so in this podcast, we certainly go into the benefits of unconventional training, the roadblocks that tends to hold people back, why people tend to get intimidated and what they can do about it to enter in some of this fantastic world of utilizing the unconventional training tools, whether it's kettlebells, mace bells, Indian clubs, whatever, and the benefits and the transfer that those things can offer to us in all aspects of life. And so we go deep into that. And in addition, we go deep into the topics of fatherhood. And Justin is a father of 2 boys. And I was fascinated to learn how he's really been raising these boys, having so much knowledge and experience in the health and the fitness and performance game. But how can we raise our children in a way that doesn't necessarily force that upon them, but really fosters an environment for them to discover it on their own? And of course, as parents, we nudge and direct them in the best way possible, but where and how can it become detrimental when we force that upon our kids? And so this was obviously so near and dear to my heart. We're going to have our baby in the next coming weeks. But even if you don't have children, reflecting back on when we were children, what was our upbringing like? What worked for us? What didn't work for us? And if we were to do things differently, for example, how might we imagine the direction that we would like to go or would have gone in a healthier way? And so this episode was fantastic. And as much as Justin has a huge presence with his Mind Pump podcast, you know, one of the things that I super appreciate about him is his just honesty and vulnerability. And, you know, he goes into one of his greatest fears, which has been public speaking, and what he's done over the years to help himself grow through and pass that fear. And so I know you're going to learn a lot on this one. Let's get right into it with Justin Andrews.
I do see a lot of similarities in my youngest with myself. And so I feel like he's the one that's going to take me out. Is the point of that. Like, I feel like he is going to put in the work and, you know, he's going to get in the gym and start figuring it out and get to a point where one day he's going to take dad out. So we wrestle all the time though.
He's going to come behind you on Thanksgiving Day and just lock arms and just next thing you know, you're in the air.
Yeah, he'll learn like jujitsu or something that I don't know, and he'll just, you know, cripple me or something, you know, and I'm going to have to deal with that.
How old is your youngest again?
He's 9.
9, and then you got 12. Okay, yeah. Very cool. And then you were telling me before we hopped on, you were telling me that your 12-year-old is getting super interested in some more extreme stuff.
He is, yeah. Yeah, which scares the hell out of me.
Like motocross or
motocross. His best friend, races with his dad.
Okay.
And so he's been slowly trying to kind of sell him on the idea of it. And my son's been expressing interest in that direction. And so I'm like looking into it and trying to see, like, do I start him with, obviously he's a little bit bigger now to start with like a 50, like we're going more like 100, something like that. Like get a bike that's like adequate size, but not too crazy and too much power. And then also too, like I was talking to Adam been really into quad racing.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit safer in terms of like, I think balance. And so I might go in that direction a bit, but just exploring that, like I never did that as a kid. And so it's unknown territory for me. So it does kind of put me back on my heels a bit to watch and to kind of experience, with them. So, but I look at that as a cool challenge for me as a parent to pull myself back and let them explore things that I wouldn't have done. And I mean, that's how gymnastics has been for me as well. Like I didn't know what to expect. And it's like, it's not a sport that I would have ever seen myself doing, but I just see massive benefit that it's brought to both kids, and their strength and their athleticism, their ability is increased substantially. So that put me in my place, checked my ego, because it's like.
Was it your wife who wanted to put them in, or you both mutually?
I think she had always wanted to do it herself as a kid.
Oh, okay.
And so it was interesting because I think she wanted to see how that all turned out, and even joked about like they have adult gymnastic class one of the days a week. And so my oldest was so mad because we were like, well, we're going to do that. And he's like, no, you guys are not going to do that. Like, we're just going to totally embarrass him. Yeah. I don't want my parents there doing gymnastic moves that I do at my gym, And so I think we've been a little reserved to do it because we don't want to like totally completely embarrass them right away, but it is something that she's very passionate about learning. And I think she's going to move in that direction. But yeah, I think she was excited about it to kind of go through that, and then kind of sold me on the idea of it. And it didn't take much to sell me, because most of the world-class strength coaches we've had on the show have all pointed to that. They've pointed to kind of starting with that foundational, something like a gymnastics or some kind of like, very proprioceptive focus of, strength and body awareness. And that's probably one of the better options out there to start and to really get that groundwork in. So I was like, logically it makes sense, but I don't know enough about it. And I'm like a very conventional sports person and have always been. And so it was a bit of an ego check for me to not have them play soccer, not have them play basketball, not have them doing football, all those things that I know and I can coach and interject. So I had to really sit in the stands and just cheer.
Dude, I totally know what you mean, because I mean, I think you may know this, but I was a gymnast as a kid too.
That's
so
right.
I was a gymnast. My brother started and he was like, I think like 4 or 5. And then I got into it maybe when I was 6 or so. Only did it till I was 14, until high school, and I had a back injury. But at the same time, just those 7, 8 years developmentally have set me up so much to like what you were saying, the body awareness, the control, the proprioception. And I remember just as a kid, like showing up to practice, and we were practicing 6 days a week, usually at minimum 2 hours, some oftentimes 3-hour sessions.
Yeah.
And so that discipline was instilled in that structure from such a young age. And then I remember almost every practice going into it scared, in the sense like I knew I was going to be challenged, and there was mats and the coach knew what they were doing, but I was always, trying a new skill or a new movement. And that repetition of years of doing that from such a young age, beyond just like the physical stuff, I think like character wise and like mental, like being more dialed in with approaching fearful things with a little bit more of like, it's okay, and not over building this stuff up, man. So I'm really excited to hear that's what you've been doing with the kids.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective, because it is a lot of, it's crazy challenges with them jumping and then flipping and doing things where you don't know how your body is really going to end up until you experience it, and you go and you can't half ass it.
You have to commit.
To go all in, which was another thing that I noticed that I really appreciated with that sport and with that discipline, because I do see that. I see that fearlessness in terms of some challenges that they face, like they, I think it has translated a bit towards the mentality that they're kind of developing towards those challenges. So hopefully that does kind of transpire later, where they can face whatever obstacle, and they have that kind of a mental discipline where they're like, yeah, I can get through this. I just have to like barrel down and buckle down and get through it. But I think it's done nothing but good. I mean, I've seen a huge change, especially with my oldest, in his arm strength. Cause that was one thing, like him throwing a ball was like, it was okay. Like he has decent mechanics, but the strength wasn't there. And I think that's one thing I've noticed too with a lot of kids in sports is just overall, like kids that I've worked with personally too, just are not strong like they used to be. And I don't know, like physical education wise, I don't know like where that disconnect is, but I've seen a massive decline in that direction. And, obviously this is kind of an exclusive, like private direction I took them to go into gymnastics, but it was the best thing I think I could have done for them, because now coming back towards conventional sports, you see how that really translates and improved his overall ability to athletically move his body, like even like fielding ground balls and throwing a baseball and just moving and spinning and cutting for basketball. And like you see, and I geek out on movement. So it's like, for me, it's cool because it's like, wow, that really worked. Like it's cool to see that.
Are you finding like with his friends, like one of the things that I've observed in kids today is like, there's this, so much of single sport focus and all year round. Like kids are playing baseball. Mm-hmm. They're oftentimes doing that all year round, travel teams, school teams, whatever. And while I remember as a kid, gymnastics for me was a year round sport. However, the movement variety and the diversity in just athletic skills that you're exposed to, even though you may be doing gymnastics year round, there's so much inherent variety. So what you were saying, I'd love for you to share more on like, how are you seeing your son as a result of being a gymnast or doing that different than his friends?
Yeah. So one thing too was, and just going back to the arm strength, I think you saw that when they were working on specific skills in gymnastics, like a handstand.
Yeah.
And that was something that was very difficult. And my son, it took him probably a little bit longer than some of the kids to really like master that and have control over it, but continuously worked at it and kept working at it and getting better over time, to the point now where, I mean, he can do multiple handsprings for tumbling, and then, really use his upper body strength to propel him into these flips. And it's fascinating to me to see, how just the pure repetition of it was enormous for that. And two, also it changed my perspective on kids exercising and training. Like there used to be this big myth out there that like if they trained too early, like it was gonna interrupt their development and stunt their growth and like all these types of things, even with lifting weights. And so what I've noticed is because of the strength acquisition there, this is where he actually had more motivation to come back to me and be like, hey, like, how do I lift weights? And like, so start asking me questions on like, what would be a good complement to this? And so we started to kind of work on real basic fundamental lifts, like a deadlift. And we start with like a heavy kettlebell, and just start with a deadlift and go through the mechanics of that. And, how we hip hinge and how we brace our body and how we, really anchor down and lift with our body supported. And so, working on things like that. And then, pressing overhead, especially too, with weights. It's just cool because it's, that's where I start to kind of geek out. And I'm like, now you're kind of you're in my domain. I've been waiting. Like, I've just been like, like salivating for the point to where my kids would come to me and like ask me for help in terms of their training because, it's this kind of, I'm in the stands and I'm kind of just waiting and anticipating that day. And so it's now finally starting to happen. And thankfully they had a good coach where he really does emphasize a lot of the strength training within the skill acquisition too, of like having to flip and having to move their body and do all these crazy feats with the trampolines and also with, the tumbling and all that they do. So yeah, it's definitely changed a lot of the way that I kind of see. I really think that that's the emphasis of body weight training and mastery over just your body's control and the ability to brace and the ability to generate force intrinsically first, then kind of addressing load and seeing how we can take that same control over our body and now we apply it to weights. It was just a natural progression. So
It makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious because I know you grew up playing football, right?
Yep.
So you played through what, high school and college too?
high school and college. Uh-huh.
And okay, so with that, let's use college. What did your training for football, by and large, big picture, what did it include?
It was definitely more intensive than the training I applied for high school. So a lot of it was, so I did a lot of power cleans. I mean, I probably did more power cleans in my time training for football than like any other time. Like I would just have like the off season was a lot of it was devoted to power cleans and backloaded squats. And so that was like the majority of the two staples lifts that I would sort of support and program around. Obviously bench press was a big one and overhead press, but there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on deadlifts, which is interesting to me in hindsight. Like, and this is also too interesting for me because I've been programming for high school kids football team personally and coaching and trying to kind of get back and give back in that direction.
Wow.
Yeah, the last 2 years I've been doing that with the high school team because I wanted to immerse myself a little bit more in the community because I live pretty close to the high school and my kids are not quite the age yet to go in that direction, but I wanted to make sure the program still existed by the time, so they had the option of doing it. Like, again, to not kind of impose my hopes and dreams and all that on my kids, but at the same time, like, hope that it was still an option and available for them. They wanted to do it and pursue it. So I've been working with the high school football team and restructuring and reprogramming their entire off season and had some pretty good result in terms of kids really gaining strength and good body mass and lean body mass and speed and power. However, I'm finding a lot of challenge I didn't anticipate addressing that specific community. And so I think it's been good for me in terms of putting myself back in that coaching seat. Because on the podcast here, it's great because we riff and we kind of tell stories of past clients and experiences we've had. But I'm not like in the mix, like troubleshooting and it kind of puts all that back into perspective for me. Like there's a whole host of challenges like I didn't anticipate, especially after like a couple of years of the lockdowns and COVID. And then, the kids only getting, I think they had like 4 games one season. And then I came in the year after that where they were starting it up again. The whole program was just completely broken.
Organizationally, schedule, their fitness.
So like some of the main coaches left that had been there for just decades. And so they were going through this kind of shift and change. And another one of my friends kind of took it over and then had approached me and was trying to get me to come help. And I had always wanted to help. I just, I don't have time. Like I don't have time. I have my own family. I have, Mind Pump, and we have all these other kinds of programs and things that we're doing here for work. But at the same time, I always wanted to, because I saw a deficit there, and I saw like it meant a lot for me growing up, having that as an outlet, especially football, because it was such like a tight like brotherhood thing, and it was really formative for me growing up and becoming a man and just like relating with other people, like working well with other people. Like there's just so many lessons I learned through that experience, and then took on even then into college, that I just found so much value out of it. And it's this collection of misfits that just don't have anywhere else to go, and it's, I was always trying to get away from my house, and like, just, that was like just a pure outlet of like performance. And I'm working on something great, and I want to be great, and I want everybody around me to be great. And we're all going to do this together, and we're going to be disciplined, and we're going to give up drinking, and we're going to give up, partying and having girlfriends. And we're just going to be like completely focused on this. And that was, our team was like that. And it's interesting because I never had that again. It was for sure. It was like my senior year. And just this razor sharp focus that, you could see what, when you get everybody bought in on something like that, like what that produces. We were a championship team. We were undefeated. We did all the things. So yeah, I just got sidetracked, but,
well, on that real quick, like what I really appreciate and respect about that is like paying it forward, like paying forward the gifts, the lessons that you learn when you're a kid. And you don't have to do this, right? You're financially, you got your business, and you've got your family, you've got other priorities and responsibility, but you chose to do this. And that is, I think, such an important thing. One memory that comes up is when I was transitioning from high school to college, I was 19. I went out, that was the year that I went out to Westside Barbell. So I spent a month out there training with Louie. And awesome. I remember reaching out to him like in the months before, telling him this is what I wanted to do. And he was very short, but very kind. He's like, yeah. Just come. And so when I finally got out there and trained and learned so much and got to work with those guys, I remember, and I'll never forget, and this is, he's since passed away. And man, at the end, we were going out with him and his wife, Doris, for a meal. And we were sitting down, and in that entire time, we had never talked about finances or money, never. And I remember at the end of the lunch, before he was going to drop me to the airport, pulled him aside and I said, Louie, I've learned so much from you this whole month, this entire month. Like, you brought me in, you've done so much for me, and you didn't even know me. You had no obligation or expectation to do anything for me. What do I owe you? Like, we've never talked about money.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he was like, Mike, you don't owe me anything. The only thing that I'm going to ask of you is when you go home to your powerlifting team, I was a part of a small knit team. He was like, basically just take everything that I've shared with you here and make your team better. And like that fucking message is like, has been not just ingrained in my mind, but in my heart. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm out there teaching and stuff like that, like it makes me feel good when I'm paying it forward. One, because it feels good to do, but also I feel like I'm honoring the lessons that him as a coach and him as a mentor instilled in me. So like, I love seeing you do that. Yeah. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. For me, it's always just been about, helping people. I mean, and that's what the podcast is. And that's like, I get something out of people learning from our experiences, our mistakes, our findings, and just like the overall improvement factor and being able to have some bit of say and control over improving yourself. Like this growth. I want that for everybody. I want everybody to pursue that type of individual growth, because you want to be around people that want to be better. And I just think it's just a healthier mentality for everybody to really pursue that personal growth. And it's one of those things. It's a hard sell because you do have to do a lot of work. And I mean, I'm still doing a lot of work, and there's a lot of self-discovery that I've had to go through to get somewhat of where I am today and like what's transpired as a result of that. But it's so worth it. And it's the opposite message of what everybody's receiving these days. And it's so frustrating to me because it's easy. It's easy to point fingers, and it's easy to blame circumstances, and it's easy to dismiss work and to avoid it. But to sell people on the idea that we all can improve, we all can be better, we all can experience this life at a much higher frequency than we're experiencing it right now is way more attractive to me. And I want to surround myself with people like that. Or if you're not like that, I'm going to, you're going to unfortunately be faced with me selling and pitching you on that idea. So, yeah, that's kind of like, I get a lot out of, even though now we just talk about it. I'm a very active person. Like I move. And so sitting is tough. Even just this is like tough for me. Communicating's always been really tough for me in terms of expressing my thoughts and opinions, but that's just been work and it's just been reps. And it's interesting to me that where I'm at now, it's like I would have never thought this is what I do for a living, for one, because I like having conversations. I like being part of the conversations, but I didn't think like I was going to be a professional at it.
Well, you had shared with me before we were on air, you were sharing with me like your biggest fear is or was public speaking and speaking in general.
Yeah.
How have you seen yourself shift in that?
Yeah.
Seeing where you are now and watching what the amount of, I don't know, you guys have done like, 2,000 shows?
Yeah. We're getting close to about 2,000.
So you've laid down some reps.
Yeah.
So how has that been?
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's, it was very much something. I think there was a moment as in fourth grade, and I could literally point to that, which is crazy. But it's because it was a big failure in terms of my delivery. And it made a big imprint on me because I was supposed to talk about something in front of the entire class and teach them something. And instead of doing something in my own wheelhouse and like something I knew really well, I was kind of going back and forth trying to get ideas from my mom at the time. And then she kind of sold me on the idea of like teaching them how to make some kind of like baking cookies or something. Like it was some kind of like bar that she had made many times. And then she kind of walked me through it. And then, so anyways, I had no interest in it. And therefore I didn't absorb any of those steps. And so I go to present this in front of the class and I just literally froze. And I had like this panic and this moment of like this realization that I was completely full of shit. And I'm sitting there in front of my classmates and I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Nothing. Like, I don't know what steps you take for this bar. I don't know how to make it. Like my mom talked me into this. Like I like lost my shit, dude. Like I ran out of the classroom and it just was the most embarrassing moment I can think of. I mean, I had a lot of embarrassing moments growing up, but like that was just a formative one for me just because I had this, like, I'm an imposter, like I'm a fake, I'm a charlatan, like, what am I doing? Like I'm supposed to be teaching you guys something I know. I don't know this. And so that just carried with me. Unfortunately, every time I would go to present something in front of class, I was like fighting that same feeling. Like you're an imposter, you're fake, you're phony. And so I just had to work through that, and it was rough. Like I had many moments of that later in high school, that I would just really like talk myself up over and over and over. Like, no, I know this. And I would memorize things and I would make sure that like I had all my ducks in a row if I went to go present. I would just get the sweats, and I was just like so uncomfortable and just beside myself because I was never, it never came naturally. It was always work. And I was eventually able to calm myself down and kind of get to a point where I could present in front, but I still never liked it. It just wasn't something I was interested in. And now it's like, because this is more conversational, it feels fine. Like it's great. It's when things get academic and they get very specific and detail oriented where I just like, oh my God, like I'm going to ruin this. Like I'm going to screw this up. And it just, a thought starts and then that thread sort of expands and then I take myself down and I sabotage myself. And so I've done a lot of work in that direction and have, and so this is actually what motivated me to pursue this improv class, which was fucking terrifying. It was terrifying. And I did this unbeknownst to the guys. I just was like, I got to get better at this. And I got to work through this. This is a fear of mine. This is something that's stayed with me and I want to get rid of it. Like I'm over it. And I just looked and signed up for this class in San Jose. It was comedy sports and I didn't know anybody and just kind of showed up. And the funny part is like I get there and we're doing all these silly drills and they really make you like act the fool, like in front of people you don't even know, to get you to sort of release the fact that nobody in here is going to be cool doing this stuff, but we're all working on getting through that block, that sort of cognitive block that we place where it's like you screen everything you say. Right. I was very good at screening what I was saying, even on the podcast, very good at filtering through and making sure, like cross-checking everything before I delivered it, because God forbid, one of those details is off or whatever. And then, the moment would just go and then my opportunity was gone. And so like a lot of the interjections and things like on the show, like I wouldn't be able to get my input in there because it was too much filtering. So this really helped me to just kind of break through that and just trust my gut. Like, I'm just going to say whatever is on top of my mind right now. I'm just going to be out with it. And it was fucking terrifying. And, because you say some things that everybody's like, ugh, like, it might be too sexual and, it might be inappropriate, for the group, I don't know, got to read the room a little bit, there's a bunch of people that were like, some, I don't know if they're sort of like ready for some of the, like, cause I like to joke a lot. And so that too was, I found that I had to kind of figure that out as well. Like it just be okay with the fact that it's not always going to land either. Like I'm going to bomb, like I'm going to say something, it's not going to go over well, but that was great. It definitely helped. It helped me learn how to trust the fact that I could say something and I could deliver something and may not be perfect, but also too, I can work through that and explain my way through that. I don't have to like land it as punctual as I want. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be polished. To be able to stay in the conversation and work my way through those ideas, that I felt like had real good translation towards the podcast.
Dude, that's so insightful. And one of the things that comes up, you were telling me before that your youngest son is basically like a carbon copy of yourself.
Yeah.
Has a lot of the same triggers, a lot of the same way of viewing the world and operating. And I'm curious if your son experiences the same massive fear of public speaking, what words of wisdom would you give him?
It's been really interesting because there's ways that we grow up that in somebody that I've worked with too, that my wife and I have also kind of gone through some counseling and things to work through our relationships. And something like this lady told us was like, we get injected. A lot of these ideas get injected in us in our journey kind of growing up. And I just wanted to be real conscious of that, not injecting him with any of my fears. What's held me back in the way that I have looked at opportunities and in presenting things in class in front of the, just projects or putting himself out there in public or on video and just saying whatever. He's been very interested in having conversations, in stepping up in front of class and presenting ideas. And he just naturally gravitates to that, which is tripping me out.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be me trying to help coach him up. Like, you can work through this, and just exposure therapy, or like, let's work through these opportunities. Let's find something out there that scares you, and let's work our way through it. Right.
What you did.
Yeah. What I did, like, cause that's how I worked through it. But he just has like a natural ability to communicate and step in front, and doesn't have that reserve, doesn't have that fear that I did. So, but it literally acts just like I did when I was his age. It's really trippy. But it just goes to show, like, he didn't have that formative imprint kind of injection of fear and like, if you don't do well, like, you're going to be rejected. And so to me, it's interesting to watch, because I know there's other things, like, for him, if he doesn't get things right, it really like aggravates him. Like, so if he's working through a problem with math, or if he can't figure out something that on his own and he needs to get help for it, like, that's a real battle, which is, I could identify with that a lot. And, was very much of a characteristic I had, and would be very hard on myself over anybody else. Like, it was always like, oh my God, like, I'm terrible at this. I suck at this. Like, there was all this negative, like, reinforcement that, and so I think for me to kind of step in and help him kind of work through those moments has been impactful, because that happens probably more than him being fearful of expressing himself and his ideas to his peers or in front of a group. It's more just like working through problems and things that, like, he's like, why am I not good at this? And I'm like, it's, you just have to work through it, and just one step at a time, and let's tackle this part of it, and let's piece it out, and let's take deep breaths, and let's step out, and let's calm. Let's get into that calm.
Reflecting on today's show, one of the things that really sticks out as a parent to me is the type of father that Justin is, and the type of father that he strives to be. And I'm fully in awareness that not everybody has a father like Justin, or had a father like him, or a father that I had. And with that being said, there's so many benefits to simply having healthy father figures in our life, healthy models. And that's something that is so lacking today. And it's becoming more and more and more evident through the work that I'm doing with the men, especially at the Men of Movement retreat. And so this is a call out and a call up for any man listening to this podcast who is looking for guidance, who is looking for a sincere group of brothers to grow alongside. I mean, how many times in life can we say that we've actually had a safe space where we can open up with the challenges that we are facing at given points in our life, and really maybe be held accountable and held us to the standards that we wish to be better in our life, but not necessarily judged us for it? That's so rare. And so that is one of the big inspirations for creating the Men of Movement retreat, is to create a container, a powerful container where men can come together and get honest feedback with how they're showing up and or not showing up, and to go into that, to go into the fire and use the force of the fire to transmute that energy so that we can break some of these patterns and behaviors that we know are not serving us, but we've just never had it modeled on how to break through that and how to integrate that into our life into a healthy way. And so I'm very excited. As always, every single time I get to share an ad on this, I get so excited because it really does, one, it nourishes me so much. One, it of course helps provide food for my family, but more than anything, it is the thing that excites me most to lead in this world, to see men rising to the occasion, wanting to break these patterns that they know are dysfunctional, whether it's in their own life or their health, how they relate to their loved ones, whether it's family or intimate partners, or for example, not showing up fully in their careers, maybe living a life of a job that they fucking hate. And so to create a container where guys can come together and work through this, man, it's felt so good. And so the next retreat is happening June 8th through the 11th. We run these in Mount Shasta, California on an organic farm. That is all I'll say for right now. But if you are interested in finding more information, you will hop on a call with me. You'll get access to my calendar and we'll work through some stuff. It will absolutely be a discovery call to hear what you're working through in life right now, where you want to be better. With your permission, as always, if there's coaching opportunities for me to support you on the call, I absolutely will. And then we will go through some of the details of the retreat to really see if it's a good fit for you. All you got to do is you can click the link in the show notes or just go to mikesalemi.io. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a Men of Movement retreat drop down. Check it out for more information as well as a link to apply.
It's so cool to hear how you're parenting him because I really feel like it's like you're a cornerman. You're a cornerman and like for your fighters, cornerman, and knowing how to guide them, how to push them and give them that like Mick from Rocky, feedback sometimes, but then also how to be Adrian as well and how to be nurturing. And I super resonate with that inner critic piece because the perfectionist, the inner, like with, anyone who has perfectionist tendencies or a gravitation towards that is likely going to have a pretty harsh inner critic. And so for me, it's been like at first I wanted to swing the complete opposite direction. Like, okay, at times I'm going to try my best not to be perfect. I'm just going to put whatever it is out there. And then that didn't really feel good. And then when I was, let's say, creating a program and spending exponentially more time than I probably should have on it, it's been one of those things where it's like, how do you find the middle ground, or how does to not abandon, because that can be a strength too. So it can be a strength and a weakness, but it's like, how do we find that middle ground? And I think one of the big things is having a cornerman, someone in your life who knows, loves, and respects you, and isn't trying to inject you per se with a specific type of belief system, but is just trying to model and be there. Like I love what you said, even with your kid who's 12, like you've been sitting back, you've been in the stands. And I can only imagine that's probably really hard to do when you love them so much.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't like to use the word, but it makes me a bit anxious. Like I'm like, I'm excited for him, but at the same time, I'm like, it's that bit of control. Like I think we all we want to have ability to control things. And that's what I'm checking myself on the most is my control. Whereas he's not going to learn what he needs to learn if I'm putting myself in that position. If I'm getting in front of it, I'm stepping in front of his development. It's a hard thing because you love them so much and you want them to thrive and have success and learn and develop these skills. And be able to think their way through all these challenges and obstacles. But if you step out and you rationally think about that, what good are you doing if you're stepping in and basically doing the work for them? It's really not productive in terms of like getting the outcome that you really want. But it's a really hard thing because like the wisdom of it in terms of like my life experience and just going through a lot of the problems they're going through and even knowing what I know in terms of how to train the body and become more athletic and strong and powerful and fast. Like, I'm like, I have all these tools, you know, I got all these tools I'm just holding on to and waiting. And it's the waiting part that's just, it's brutal, you know, but if I'm patient enough, they'll ask for it. And so, yes, I'm constantly checking myself. It's not easy. I do sometimes want to just be like, look, I have the answers right here.
I got the answer.
I got them. Use them.
Yeah.
But they have to want it, or it's not going to land. So, and two, part of that is the struggle. You don't want to watch your kids struggle, but they have to struggle. And it's about the right, I think it's the right dose of struggle, and very similar and parallel to working out. It's just, you need to find that right dose to adapt and to acquire what you need to acquire from that lesson. So I look at it like that a lot too. They're right now they're exercising, you know, whatever it is, whether it's trying to get better at their sport, trying to get better at school, trying to learn how to navigate through the culture, how to navigate through life, how to navigate through social media and the internet and, you know, all this madness. It's a lot. And even to have him have his own phone has been like, it's been a nightmare for us as parents, you know, like, it's like, do we allow it? Do we just control? Do we filter everything out so that way, you know, we drip in what they can be exposed to at appropriate levels? Yeah, so there's a lot more to this whole parent game than I was ready for. So, and two, it changes. Like, I have like a real solid idea. Like, this is going to be the way we're going to do it. Like, we're going to get this app. There's this new app out there that basically shuts off their phone at this time, and then it scrubs like all the imagery. So, you know, I mean, there's cool technology out there that can do that. And we worked through that, and I'm like trying to have conversations with him about it. Like, look, I know there's things on the internet you want to look at, and he's at that point where he's just basically a teenager and his body's changing. He's going through puberty. He's noticing girls, and, you know, so I have to have the porn conversation. I have to have the like website conversations, and also too, just like the comments, like, you know, getting too wrapped into other people's, because the negative ones are what always stick with us. We just see one negative comment or one thing, and it literally just interrupts your entire thought process the whole rest of the day. And it's such a waste. And so I more than anything don't want him to be just drawn into that pit of despair.
Especially with a big inner critic that he's got.
Yeah. So that's what concerns me the most, is that toxic element of it.
Yeah.
You know, sure, you can wrap in like, oh, they're hanging out with their friends and interacting, and like, yeah, it's way better in person. You can't beat it. I don't care what anybody says. Like, meeting in person, like developing those social cues, reading, you know, their body language, being able to basically change and be flexible with whatever you're talking about and delivering based off of like how the person's reacting to you. And that's so important. And all that is lost on a screen. So yeah, man, big challenges. And I know you're going to be stepping in this arena here soon, man, with having a kid. And so, I mean, it's obviously, you know, I'm at this stage now where this is new territory for me to go back and go through again these formative years of, you know, going through being a teenager and puberty and all that. So it's like all these different stages present all new variables, all new challenges. And it keeps life interesting.
Well, dude, I'm so excited to be a dad, and like, I'm surrendering to the fact, or doing my best to surrender to the fact, that I'm going to allow him to teach me. And like, I don't have to have it necessarily all figured out because I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself for that. And then the other thing too is, and I'd love to transition a little bit and go back to some of the training stuff, because a lot of, I know me and you, and when we've shot videos for Mind Pump, it was always me linked up with you, and because we're like the unconventional training guys, and
definitely.
And I learned so much about myself through movement. I know you have too, like how to find my edges, how to develop those skills, how to adapt to the environment or the tool. Like a lot of what you were saying, I was like having these ahas. I was like, wow, I've learned a different version of that, but I've learned a different version of that with a similar theme through the ability to adapt to the Bulgarian bag, the kettlebell, maybe body weight training and all that sort of stuff. So I'd love to, one, you are like the unconventional, the performance guy here, which is awesome. I'm really curious, how would you maybe define unconventional training, and how was it received when you were first wanting to bring that into Mind Pump?
Yeah, I think for me, I seek out hard skills. Like I enjoy being challenged. And I think it was just kind of a natural fit when I have gone through quote unquote conventional training forever, where I've gone through commercial gyms and I've done conventional programming for sports. Like, so we've done group team training that was all sort of chalkboard driven, and everything was very systematic, and it was very much more addressing just one plane of movement more than anything. Yes, we did skills training in terms of like our running and cuts and things that translated to whatever sport it was I was playing. I played multiple sports. Football was the one that I definitely honed in on towards the end, but I played soccer, baseball, basketball. I mean, I even played rugby in college. And so anything that was like brutal and had dire consequences, like, I mean, MMA wasn't a thing, when I was growing up as much. I mean, there was definitely cage fighting that we would watch on VHS, which I loved. But, if that was more available, I probably would have been like into it. Like I did a little bit of Muay Thai training just because it was, something I was like, wow, that looks really challenging and fun and hard on my body. And I liked it was going to be hard on my body and I have to work through this and figure this out. Now, in terms of unconventional, I would say just probably ways of training you wouldn't normally see in like a 24-hour fitness or a Bally's or even like powerlifting. Like you're not going to see unconventional training as much, maybe Westside Barbell, because they did a lot of real like, cool work with rubber bands, and they brought in a lot of unconventional bars, and, they're way more forward thinking.
That's where I actually touched the kettlebell for the first time.
Really?
When I was 19 at Westside, and Louis, like, we were only doing swings, but he was advising me, and he's like, you got to buy some of these when you get back. So that was actually my very first exposure was there. So spot
rad.
on.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I think it was when I was off on my own as a personal trainer, and was just doing some experimental training. Cause I had gone through sports training. I did a lot of barbell training, very heavy. Like everything was just about like, to the point where I could peak strength wise and PR and get to those major lifts like bench, squat, and eventually dead. I was really just more focused on pure and my power cleans, because that was another big staple lift of mine. But I was like, I want to do something else. And then I got exposed to both simultaneously kettlebells and Olympic rings. And this is before TRX and the suspension training really kind of took off. One of my friends actually introduced kettlebells to me. We started training with them, and then I went through, it wasn't Strong First at the time, but I think it was through Dragon Door.
The RKC, yeah.
Yeah, the RKC. So I did a weekend of RKC, and then and Pavel actually made an appearance there, and so it was cool. I got to meet him and just really got into the nuances of how to, grip the kettlebell, how to make sure, my body was in full control, but like, expressed power at perfect timing. And then also, it's this fast loose concept, and just a lot more dynamic in terms of like your body has to be able to produce a lot of things at once, but it has to be fluid and flawless, and that was interesting because that's another level. Like, and this is why it's hard for me to really express a lot of this on the podcast, because not a lot of people are there. A lot of people are in a position where they want to feel strong, and they want to feel like their body's in good composition. And I understand that. And that was the majority of my clients. And so I would just expose them to some unconventional ways of training, just every now and then, just give them a taste. And then whoever kind of bought into it a little bit, we'd start introducing it a lot more, and that within kettlebells and then Olympic rings, I just found a whole new host of challenges that I could apply to my body, and how I needed to not only perform some of these exercises, but now stabilize myself and be able to brace and control and create this rigidity throughout my body while also doing those same movements. I'm like, wow, that's way harder, and to have all those excess of gravitational forces on me now with the Olympic rings, to be able to have the kind of mobility in my shoulders to be able to, do these, skin the cat moves and all these types of things where I'm, doing full levers. And so I really enjoyed the challenge of it. And the fact that every little incremental effort produced, ways of getting stronger and more effective and better. And you could see it. If I videotape myself, I could see the change in terms of like, it looked more fluid. It looked better. It looked like I had more control. I wasn't being pulled left to right. My body wasn't rotating. And then I feel like that made me a better coach too, to point out those little things, even just with a conventional lift. You could see a lot more of how the body likes to compensate when you go to more of an extreme level of challenge. And so that's what I really like about unconventional lifts, is between that and learning mace bells and learning Indian clubs, it was just kind of like a pursuit of like, what else did they used to do back in the day? And like Dr. Ed Thomas, I found my way to him with the Indian clubs, and that's what exposed me to that. And here's the thing. Some people trip out about like a Ronnie Coleman that's like just massive, bodybuilder that's just a spectacle, and that's insanely impressive, right? And, and for me, it's like a Bo Jackson who's just like the ultimate athlete that can high perform in on that level in two different sports, like with no off season. Like it just doesn't make any sense, but really, like I just love, I love watching beautiful movement. And you'll see that in the Olympics, and you'll see that at gymnastics for sure. But to just see like, so Dr. Ed Thomas, just watching him control these movements with the Indian clubs, and just like, it was so fluid and just on a different level than everybody else. And it's hard to articulate because you watch it and you're like in awe of what kind of control and what kind of ability. And it's so understated. A lot of people, it just goes right over everybody's head. But like, that's the stuff that I kind of zoom in on. I'm like, wow, like that's interesting.
There's a lot of brain training going on with that. The ability to coordinate all of these movements, these circular movements and left and right and simultaneously, especially with the Indian clubs. It's really such a fantastic tool that I think, and that's one of the things that's always excited me. It's like, how can I learn a skill here that will have a massive transfer into everything else in life? Mm-hmm. And so, I was actually really like, I'm actually really not surprised, but I'm impressed when you were saying the first two things that you did were kettlebells and gymnastics rings. Cause like, that's solid. Two tools that offer such a beautiful complement to each other. And like the fact that you're doing skin the cats and opening up, putting the shoulder in that position and like what you were saying, the isometric control, but you've got to stabilize. Like those are two super complementary tools. One of the things that I know about Mind Pump, like you guys have I don't know if your slogan still is, but like dispelling like fitness myths and raw fitness truth. When it comes to unconventional training or any of the tools, are there any like big myths that stick out to you with any of the tools or when people are looking at unconventional training?
I think a lot of people, I think what I see a lot is on Instagram or like on social media, it's a lot of dance moves and it's a lot of sort of glorified choreography, which to me is cool to watch, but I think people get a different perception of like how valuable those tools are. I think that they're not getting exposed to some of the more simplistic moves that have the most translation towards benefiting, say, their bench press or benefiting, some other strength pursuit or athletic endeavor. And so I think that the overall, there's a big misconception with them just sort of being this isolated tool that you can get to a point where you can do all these crazy elaborate movements with, which I think is, and I'm trying to be sort of walk the tightrope with this because I do appreciate some of that skill and that ability. And I can recognize the level they've got to be able to pull off a lot of those movements. And, it did take a lot of work and skill to develop it. But I think that it's not being sold enough to your average person. And I think there's so much, and I bring up the bench press just because I know that was the first thing I noticed was if you have a stable, mobile shoulder that is able to basically do what it's supposed to and to anchor in and to distribute that force adequately through, you're eliminating like a big kink in the chain. So for me, like I would get to a certain point where I could PR and I could lift, my 400 something pound bench press, but inevitably I'm going to get to a point where it's going to put too much wear on my shoulder because I don't have that stabilized ability where my body feels like, oh, it's okay to add more force. It's okay to generate more, to recruit more. So I guess to better answer your question, I think that people might see it more as a recovery mobility value and not a performance value. And I think this is the biggest thing I try to bring up, even with mobility movements. I want people to understand that if you are able to brace and isometrically control and eliminate rotation when it's not advantageous for you, to be able to provide that kind of support system around your joint with your muscles, like you could generate so much more force. And let's just say it's like, I don't know how much, but let's say it's 10 to 20% more output. Let's just say that. And think about that in terms of like now your strength lifts increase because that's where the hole's going to be. That's where the leak of performance is. And to go in and really address that with some of these tools like a mace bell or with Indian clubs or, we don't strengthen our rotation. We don't do that. It's an afterthought when it should be incorporated with conventional training simultaneously because it's to our disadvantage. Like we're just going to hit a point where that repetitive stress is going to compile and now it's going to set us back. Now we got to build back up because we're either injured or, we've overtrained and, our body is basically going to do what it's supposed to do and prevent us from any further harm. So to peer into that more and include it more in our programming, I think is something that everybody should consider that.
As you can tell by now, both Justin and I are huge fans of unconventional training with kettlebells. I mean, there's very few tools that you can accomplish what you can with kettlebells. I mean, when you look at their construction, that offset center of mass, I always say that the kettlebell, in comparison to other tools or in contrast to other tools, is really a live object. When you're working with a kettlebell, especially on many of the dynamic movements, or if you're familiar with bottoms up training, that kettlebell is moving and you have to reorientate your body and develop a strong enough nervous system, a more finely tuned nervous system to adapt to the movement. And that's really where we develop nervous system training, coordination, balance, and then of course, strength, stability, power, all of the performance abilities that we need to carry on in life and in many sports and activities. The uniqueness of the kettlebell and what you can accomplish with that tool that is very hard to develop with other training tools really makes it not only one of the most enjoyable training tools that I've ever used in life, but really the one that probably has, in my opinion and personal experience, probably the most carryover. It's something that you can keep at your office, in your home, in your car. You can take it with you anywhere. You could take it outside and get a beautiful workout in the sun. You can do it with friends in a small amount of space. It's non-impact. And so if you are interested in learning the nitty-gritty and being guided through really the closest thing out there to working with me one-on-one, then my kettlebell lifestyle program is certainly something worth checking out. And everyone who listens to the Path podcast will get 20% off. All you got to do is use code PATH20 and go to the link www.kettlebelllifestyle.com. I will also put this in the show notes. But if you are interested in taking your fitness, your health, your mobility to the next level, and of course your kettlebell skill, then that program is the one for you. Check it out today. Now let's get back to the show.
Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the unconventional tools is like, when you're talking about like rotation specifically, like the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Bulgarian bag, because that tool is like, I mean, it does a bunch of things really well, but it was designed to train Olympic level Greco-Roman wrestlers who are throwing people left and right. Like the ability to train rotation, that's really as a gap in a lot of people's approach to conventional training. I think Paul Chek would say, like, if you can't, you must. And so a lot of these tools are perfectly suited to that, which is with a barbell, like it's a great tool for the things it does well, like building high levels of strength, especially in the squat, the bench, the deadlift, the clean, etc. But it's not a tool that you're really going to gravitate towards to express rotation. Mm-hmm. So I really think that's where like the unconventional tools are perfect with working out so many of the weaknesses that we see today. And one of the, as you were sharing, one of the like myths that I've heard and just seen a lot is, well, two things. But the first thing is that there's this, like, I get a lot of people being intimidated by the tools, and I'd love to hear your experience on that. And for me, it's, I could see that. Like if you see a fucking kettlebell, flying, or someone's juggling with kettlebells or something just looks intimidating, or someone did a clean or a snatch and it hurt their forearm once. And then there's that feel response. But like with anything, it's an understanding that like there is a process to this. You have to learn. And going back to one last thing that you shared earlier, when I'm programming for myself, probably 80% of the time that I'm training, it's actually with base movements, because being mobile and feeling really good and then having adequate fundamentals, that's what allows me to do more of the sexy stuff that people really like to see. That usually is what gets them in the door. But then when I'm actually programming, it's like, dude, there's so much benefit to just doing well a kettlebell swing.
Yeah.
So much. You don't even need the juggling, or you don't even, if you want to express that later, but that comes with time. Mm-hmm. So what's been your experience with people being intimidated by a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, that's a common one. It's I'm going to hit myself in the head, with the mace bell or the Indian clubs.
Hit myself in the balls.
Yeah. It's just this, I think it's so foreign initially. To people, because it's just not in their scope of, like, they haven't even seen it in any gym that they've been a part of. And so it's just a foreign idea. And I think that, like you said, there's a process to each one of those tools, where just getting a good grip and just, feeling your way through some basic swings to just get started. Like, just like anything else, it's going to take that introduction to it, that willingness to suck and understand that you're not going to be very good. You're going to be clumsy, because your body is still trying to organize itself and figure its way through what you're tasking it to do. So it's all of that. And especially with the unconventional stuff, it takes a lot of detail in terms of like the procedure and the way that you're working through that. So I think once you get the tool in the person's hand, I think that's the first step, right? And that's really like, you feel empowered because now it's less foreign, it's less of a scary, weird thing. Like oh, well, I can at least like lift it up and kind of bring it behind my head and then bring it back and then under control. Like, what can I do right now that my body feels like adequate to control? So we'll start there. And we'll start kind of adding in little bits to challenge it further and get further along within the desired outcome of what that entire exercise is going to look like. So it's just like anything else. It's any new sport is going to have that same type of fear getting into it, because nobody likes to be the one that sucks right away. Like, you don't want to be the total beginner again, especially if you've gone through training and lifting and like you feel pretty proficient in a lot of the other lifts. God forbid, like we now step into an unconventional tool and it's like you're starting all over. You're like a little baby fumbling around and trying to figure it out. But that's where all the growth is. And again, this is back to the whole part of the conversation in the beginning. I'm drawn to that. That excites me. Like I know I'm going to suck. I'm going to suck when I pick it up and I'm going to be like, whoa, this is a weird, because, some of these are just the weight itself. It's heavy in the bottom. It's light in the top. It's pulling me left. It's pulling me right. I have to try to figure out how to even just control and stabilize. Like even one of those like iron clubs, like just holding one, it's like, whoa, it challenges you from so many different directions, and your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, like everything else. And then like just channeling that in with your core to be able to control and like pull it centric to the body. It takes a lot of effort, but once you figure it out, it's like, ooh, okay, I'm onto something here. And it's empowering because now it's not something that is out of your scope. Like, ooh, I can work on this and get better at, I know I can get better. It's not that like, I'll never do that, or that's not for me, or that's not ever going to work. I'm taking it now and now I'm going to figure it out. So I find myself always looking for that.
In life,
in
lifting,
in general.
That's beautiful, man. What would you say as we close out here? Is there any like final words of wisdom or anything that comes up for you for someone who, we can use the unconventional training as the example, but someone maybe a little bit fearful to give it a try? What insight might you share with them, or any final words?
I think that that's a natural response. And I think that really it's what you do that determines, it's what you do that determines where you go. I mean, it's at a certain point, we make all these decisions to kind of form who we are. And I think that each decision is an important one. And to be able to empower yourself with ways of challenging your body is going to make your body better. Ways to challenge yourself in terms of communicating is going to make you a better communicator, which in turn is going to make you more effective in your job, in your relationships. And I just think that it's that initial first step. That's the scariest part, It's actually grabbing the tool. It's actually signing up for the class. It's actually stepping out in front of a crowd and just start talking. So I think that honestly that's the most terrifying part of the entire thing. So if you just do that part, then you're already miles ahead of most people. And so it's just whatever that is, like if you could figure out like what scares you, if you just make one little tiny step, I think it'll go so far, and it'll empower you, and it'll embolden where you want to go. Like it'll turn you into who you want to be. And I think that these are all things that shape you as a person. So it's as simple as training tools and just making that conscious decision to improve every day in whatever direction it is, whether it's just lifting weights conventionally and just building yourself up and your overall strength, or just, losing some weight, or, making better decisions with nutrition, or just cutting out some stress in your life. There's so many things you can do. And I think that we forget to focus on that. You can do so many things to improve, and just focus more on that. Less on what everybody else is doing, less on the current state of of the culture and being not having access to things, or not having something, or whatever the deficits are, or whatever the negative things are. We don't really need to give that much emphasis. We can just focus on improving in small steps.
Dude, this has been so much fun, man. Thank you for dropping that wisdom. And thank you for everything that you do, not just for supporting me, and but for you guys paying it forward and putting out so much, free content and everything you're doing. And great to hear about the high school team, man. So
yeah, no, I'm excited for you, and that you're getting into this arena. I think that there needs to be more sound advice out there, and good people like yourself doing it. So I'm pumped, and I hope that this really does good things for you. I'm excited for you, dude.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow the podcast on Apple and leave a review. It means a lot. We all have a path, and I'd love to hear how this podcast has inspired you in some way to live yours.